so we are almost good to go. All right, so we're gonna be spotlighting the readers just so you can see all their pretty faces. So hello, hi, my name is Molly Harris. I'll be your host for the night. I'm the managing editor of River Styx Literary Magazine. There is a $5 suggested donation, which you can pay through the link that I'm about to drop in the chat. Like I said, it's a donation, don't feel pressured. This is a free reading. To get us started, I would like to thank the following for their support. The Regional Arts Commission, the Missouri Arts Council, the Missouri Humanities Council, as well as the Kransberg Arts Foundation. I'd like to thank you all for coming too. We really appreciate it. I would like to take a moment to remind everyone to please keep themselves muted while our writers are speaking. If you would like to give kudos or a comment, feel free to utilize the chat box feature. I feel like those are always fun during virtual readings. So tonight we have three amazing writers, Miho, Nonaka, James Poissant, and Jonah Mixon-Webster. First up is Miho Nonaka. She is a bilingual poet from Tokyo, and she is the author of the Museum of Small Bones. Her poems and essays have appeared in various journals and anthologies, including the Iowa Review, Kenyon Review, Missouri Review, Ploughshares, Prairie Schooner, Southern Review, Tin House, American Odysseys, Writings by New Americans, and Helen Burns' poetry anthology, New Voices, from the Academy of American Poets. She is an associate professor of English and creative writing at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois.
Wow, so it's me now? Oh my goodness. So I'm really, really excited. Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you, Jason, River Styx. And I'm really excited to be reading with Jamie and Jonah tonight. Such an honor. I'm gonna start with some prose poem called Rapture. And this was kind of inspired by this thing I used to do when I was in junior high. I used to cook, the marbles in the frying pan, kind of like making a stir fry, but it's like with glass. Once they got really hot, like you just put them in ice water and it shocks the glass. So the middle part gets shattered, but then it's still kind of contained in a sphere. And I just love doing it. And I don't recommend anyone to do it. I think it can be quite dangerous to do it, so don't do it. But let me see. This is what it looks like once it's shattered. That also was a time I was starting to learn English. I was born and raised in Japan, and also that was the time the Japanese emperor at the time was dying as well. So, Rapture. There were nights I just had to cook marbles. I knew mother would hit me when she discovered her wrecked pan the next morning. We had no special oil for frying glass, and cooking only with dry heat did much harm to the pan's surface. It was the year I began learning English in school. The word harm never appeared in any of my textbooks. All the same, I would reach for a jar of marbles on the spice shelf. The cheapest kind for children, each marble held a primary colored flame at its core, vivid as a pupil. I heaped them on my palm, listening to them squeak as they rubbed together. No one taught us how to love foreign words, nor the logic behind their syntax. Soon, marbles would start their rattle and roll in the pan. In the workshop below, Father was building a crystal radio on the cusp of two Japanese eras. The emperor he had once believed was divine was dying, said the news. No longer a god, but a symbol emptying itself. Blindly, I kept cooking in the midnight kitchen. The moment the heated orbs grew ready to pop, I transferred them to a bowl of ice water. The sizzle, the crackle inside each glass sphere. Fissures, silver scars radiated. Nebulous damage contained within clear little bowls. So I had a heck of a time trying to learn English, and I'm really excited tonight. My high school friend, Asako Seriwazawa, is here. I think she kind of knows a little bit of my struggle with the English language. Thank you, Socks. So the second poem called Volvox is going to be in the River Styx journal. Thank you, River Styx. And Volvox is a type of green algae. I'm sorry, I tend to get obsessed with weird things. But it's a tiny algae and it forms spherical hollow colonies that have smaller spheres inside that are like daughter colonies. So each Volvox looks like a gleaming planet housing multiple baby planets inside. And so watching Volvox under a microscope is kind of breathtaking. It's beautiful. I used to be glued to my biology textbook when I was in elementary school. Volvox. Our orbits are most poignant when we sought to please Father, believing there still was something that would please him, the state of innocence my sister and I lived in. After each rain, boys would dash out like knives, crush earthworms underfoot. We had a crush on the same boy with a mantis face and skinny limbs. We thought his blood ran clear as grass juice. Crush sounds so violent, I winced when I first heard the word, but now it sounds appropriate somehow. Summer, we splashed around the warm, nutrient-rich water. We'd squeeze pond scum, watch it under the microscope in Father's room, while boys fished, caught stag beetles, built a fortress in the heart of the forest, who knows where. At night, fireworks sizzled, scorched paper lanterns dangling from the jungle gym. After the bath, we took note of Father's toenails, yellow, misshapen with fungus growing underneath. He had only ever thought of boys' names before birth. In the season of eggs of all sorts, we walk carefully between rain and heat, whisper and bubble. At the edge of sleep, I see a magnified Volvox, no ordinary algae, but a planet housing gleaming cells, the hollow globe with daughter cells and granddaughter cells like tiny balls, lit from within. I take my sister's hand to enter, joined by strands of cytoplasm with swimming unison, each waving flagella to propel our spinning world through rainwater. We bounce and divide. One day, we'll turn inside out, become our own planets, asexual colonies. The next poem is called Autumn Note. As if the trees that I didn't know were there, become incandescent to call attention to my inattention during my morning walk. On the other end of the street, the renovation of my colleague's elegant rickety house looks complete with its anemic Victorian feel. Blessed are the meek. My mouth likes to form inaudible words during our business meetings, for they shall inherit the earth. But what about the fierce? Before their fall, the leaves are raised hands in flames here as elsewhere. When I was a girl, Mother let me touch scissors only during our origami lessons. To turn a samurai hat into a goldfish, we flattened it sideways, cut 2 near triangles, folded them back as a pair of fins. They would be there, thrusting the body forward, deeper into foreign waters, casting glinting scars. Blessed are the meticulous fingers somewhere under the sky, cutting longing into sharper shapes. Blessed are those who remain lit despite their poverty, keep burning to the last of their vibrance, leaves eddying over the earth like clear flames. The next poem is called Anpanman, and Anpanman is an anime character for Japanese children, and he's a superhero, but his head is like a jelly donut. His face is basically pastry, and it's got very sweet bean paste inside. And he's flying about, and whenever he sees someone who's hungry, he comes down and offers his face and say, have it, eat my face, kind of thing. And the author, who passed away actually, he's the first one to publish my poem. That was in Japanese when I was 13. So I wrote an kind of an homage to Anpanman Now my son loves it. So not my poem, Anpanman. Anpanman, half human, half pastry. Anpanman, even as I write this, you're on patrol, flying over a certain modern or postmodern city, say Tokyo, in search of some of us starving individuals. From shoulders up, you have no neck. You're literally one big bean jump bun, slightly burnt and deeply shiny. You never hesitate to tear off and offer your eggy self, dark beans oozing from within, whispering to the dazed and to the hungry, here, eat my face. Then you fly back headless to your father, the baker, who will proudly replace the void with another bun fresh from the oven, the eternal cycle. Anpanman, you're a hero whose birth was an accident, whose arrival each time is sheer luck and never part of the divine scheme. As for your goodness, we are no judge. We embrace your essence, a paste of pure naivete inside the century-old sake-raised dough. Those street-smart boys and girls sneer at you, sticking their fingers down their throats. You stay on duty, no matter whether you like your squishy face to be nourishing or nauseating. It is your role, Anpanman, like so-called fate. Half man, half bun. Inside the TV screen, impossible sunflowers wave their verdant hands at you, Anpanman, with your newborn brothers, Toast Man and Donut Man, in their white and ochre costumes. Sweetness without integrity. Find my skies, Anpanman, come swiftly down. Instead of greeting, let us pinch each other's cheeks for doughy sympathy. My hunger is beyond your speciality, until we can stomach our kinship, when at last we are ready to exchange our faces. Next one is called Easter Cherries. And of course, watching cherry blossoms in April is such a big thing in Japan. And that's probably the thing that makes me the saddest, being away from Japan. Friends try to plant cherry trees in Chicago, but you can't really plant quite the same kind of cherry trees. I think it has to be weeping cherries, and they kind of are different, but they tried anyways. So Easter cherries. Far from home, weeping cherries started blooming for the first time outside the church. This is their 5th Easter in Chicago. Not breathtaking like those clouds after clouds of blush petals along the Smida River, but darker, wispy flowers drooping downward. Still, our pastor insists on the cherry viewing. The youth spread a mat under the trees, and instead of traditional mochi bowls in 3 shades, we snack on stale, craggy cookies, a donation from Costco, one of their tax reduction tools. The pastor wants a picture with his wife and 2 daughters, both single and perfectly bilingual. They take turns translating jokes and sermons into English for the non-Japanese like my husband. Their mother calls them her kingdom soldiers, who partake of every discomfort required of their parents' mission, their untranslatable lives. The weeping branches are nothing but an obstacle for our children. They feel no longing when flowers scatter, consumed in gathering cheap plastic eggs strewn over the grass. Triumphant, my son holds his peeps like tiny pyramids in glittering sugar. He understands, but does not speak my mother tongue. Chick by chick, he tears off and swallows its neon marshmallow body, while I wonder why I ever allowed myself to believe that one day I would feel less alone. The pastor, in his leather jacket, might well pass for middle-aged Yakuza if he'd not one afternoon received God's calling in Bone Dry, California, waiting for an oil change on his beat-up Toyota. Our elder, Mr. Aoki, who lost his engineering job in the city just before retirement, lectures on how to make salted cherry cake using a bread machine. Mr. Aoki Mrs. Aoki pours green tea in everyone's styrofoam cup, apologizing for its bitterness, urging us to take more American cookies. No sake accompanies our Easter cherry viewing, but the pastor's face has turned pink, and in silence, we take in how much his hairline has receded over the last year or two. We have no lyres to hang on the trees but our hearts. What opens our hearts to these blossoms is their momentary pause, marked by the clarity of their leave-taking. Sitting upright on the mat, his eyes tracing the petals, another elder, Mr. Suzuki, whispers, "Will there be such flowers in heaven?" The next one is called Fragrant Harbor. Fragrant Harbor, I know it's a bit awkward, but this is basically what Hong Kong, the name Hong Kong means, this Fragrant Harbor in Chinese. And I was really consumed by the passing, last year, China passed a new national security law for Hong Kong. I have some people in Hong Kong that I really deeply care about. And the law was dangerously vague. Virtually anything could be deemed a threat to national security, and you could be imprisoned for a lifetime. And even before the passing of this law, the police have been beating and arresting and killing people indiscriminately. But now, if you carry a sign that has the word conscience in Chinese, you'll be arrested. Same thing with the sign that has the biblical verse from the book of Amos, but let justice roll on like a river and righteousness like a never failing stream, which of course Martin Luther King Jr. used in his famous letter from a Birmingham jail. And even if you hold a blank sign, you can be arrested. So this poem is actually not finished, but I just thought I'll share. I mean, it's sort of unfinished, imperfect form. Fragrant Harbor, there's an epigraph from Ezra Pound's cantos. To be lord to the four seas of China, a man must let men make verses. He must let people make comedies, and historians write down the facts. You are determined to stay. The last persimmon hanging on the top branch against the winter sky. A city, an ocean of colors dazzle bird brains, lure them toward lit surfaces where they crush headlong. Larger bodies, beaten to death, are thrown into the sea, rule suicides. The new normal, don't dress in black, keep a voluntary curfew. You need multiple cell phones for separate contact lists. No more crossing borders. Your old teacher shot point blank in the eye for halting on the pavement. The police are still after anyone who holds up a blank sheet of paper. At dusk or dawn, the city looks beautiful from Sky Lounge, the water reflecting pink, yellow, blue, opalescent lights like bolts of fabric. There have been a lot of such suicides since July. So you ask, what is home? A cool hand on the forehead when you awake, suddenly a child and sweating from fever and dreams. The only light you notice in the middle of dark plains from the train window, because your companion, whom you won't see again after he gets off, suddenly turns and speaks to you in a soft voice. That's my home. Look. This one is called Griddle, Through the Wood. And it was inspired by the two great poems by Marie Howe. Part of Eve's Discussion, which is a really famous poem. And less famous, but I really love this poem, Griddle from a Sudden Clearing. And I finished this poem and sent it to Marie. So Griddle, Through the Wood. It was like getting lost in the wood whose heart you enter one kind of person and emerge quite another. Isn't that what a story is? A beginning, an end, and whatever in between. A clearing where you find yourself one morning. Few crumbs from the dark loaf you shared with him the night before. There's no more turning back home. There was no home. It was like falling out of a dream and waking up in another, not trusting your body would cast a shadow. The velvet of the moss means years. The berries for snakes gleam just beyond your touch. Leaves are the birds who have sealed their songs in green. Beneath them all, the water couldn't run purer. You call him over and over, the name growing more foreign each time, like a city that belongs to someone else's dream. When you finally stumble into a world out of the wood, your mouth will have tasted earth. Your words won't be understood for what they are. People grow restless when you sing fragments. They will teach you poetry while bread keeps rising. Here, children become adults so quickly, you are the last girl whose shadow pulls on the ground at dusk. When the wind dies, you catch the sound of pollen falling gold between the trees. Even as you sing in a new way, their way, your song points to him for months and years until one day it doesn't. There are more voices you didn't know you have. Don't be afraid. You're being dreamed by someone outside this world every bloody step of the way in the story. More hearts to enter. Don't be afraid. You are abandoned. You have been dearly loved. And I'm gonna finish with this poem, Border. Border. When you look up, the tree is full of birds as if they've grown in clusters overnight. Dark fruit made of beaks and feathers. There must be a world beyond such a series of self-projections. To see clearly is poetry, prophecy, and religion all in one, said John Ruskin. Underneath the smell of the leaves, merging with dirt, decaying along their margins. Why sing in a tongue not your own? String strangeness into a spell that fuels your fear and keeps you hungry. Voices copious in the land, drained of colors on the cusp of winter. The morning after the flood, this is the closest you've come to the edge of the unreal. The tree standing drenched in rain, a border between here and elsewhere. Neither the mystic's crystal castle nor the gallery of glass flowers next door, but a tree dripping with piercing cries, all mouths, beating leaves. The birds and branches are one, entwined for necessary heat. It's you waiting to be translated. Thank you.
Thank you, Miho. Those were so beautiful. That last line, that was really good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Perfect. So up next is James Poissant. He's the author of the novel Lake Life, a New York Times Editor's Choice selection, Publisher Weekly Summer Read, and a Million's Most Anticipated Book of 2020. His short story collection, The Heaven of Animals, was a winner of the GLCA New Writers Award and a Florida Book Award, a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize, and was longlisted for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize. His stories and essays have appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, One Story, Ploughshares, the Southern Review, and in numerous textbooks and anthologies, including New Stories from the South, Best New American Voices, and Best American Experimental Writing. His books are currently in print in 6 languages. He teaches in the MFA Program in Creative Writing at the University of Central Florida, where he lives in Orlando with his wife and his daughters.
Thank you so much, Molly. Can everyone hear me okay? Maybe give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Molly, for the introduction. Thank you, Jason, for asking me to do this. Thank you, River Styx and sponsors. Thank you, Miho, for that amazing reading. I love reading with poets. And whenever my fiction students ask me, what can I do to be a better fiction writer? I say, read more poetry. And if they ask me why, I say, if you have to ask why, you don't read enough poetry. So that was gorgeous. And I'm just, I'll do my best to follow that. So I'm going to be reading tonight from my novel. It's the novel Lake Life that Molly mentioned. So real quick, I've never gotten good at distilling the premise down into like 2 sentences, but briefly, it's the story of a family, the Starling family. It's a mother and father in their 60s. They're approaching retirement age, They have called their grown sons and their eldest son, Michael, and his wife, Diane, their younger son, Thad, and his partner, Jake. They've called them back to this family lake house in the Carolinas to spend a last weekend at the house before it is sold. And when they're there, they witness this really awful tragedy. A boy in the lake community drowns. And their son, Michael, dives in to try to save him and bashes his head on the boat in trying to do so. He's fine, but he has to be taken to the hospital. So I'm going to pick up here with chapter 4. And in this scene, this is the novel weaves in and out of all 6 points of view of mother, father, sons, and partners. And so this is Diane's point of view. So this is chapter 4. It's a short one. And this is Diane and her husband, Michael, in the ambulance on the way to the hospital when he's cut his head. Diane Maddox exhales. Diane Maddox, who traded Tennessee for Texas. Diane Maddox, whose parents are divorced. Diane Maddox, who married Michael 10 years ago and would not take her husband's name. Diane Maddox, who carries a child inside of her. Diane Maddox, who had an abortion in high school and who does not regret that choice, but who is not in favor of making that choice again. Diane Maddox, who went to school to be a painter before settling for being a those who can't do art teacher. Diane Maddox, who wonders whether 33 is too early for a midlife crisis, were women said to have those, and if those meant more than a red motorcycle and the affair to go with it. Diane Maddox, who has been reassessing her infinitesimal place in the cruel and sideways pressing world. Diane Maddox, who likes dangly earrings. Diane Maddox, who has always longed to visit Reykjavik. Diane Maddox, who grew up watching Mad About You and wanted to be Helen Hunt. Diane Maddox, who in 8th grade cried through the Mad About You finale, cried over the fact that Paul and Jamie were not together anymore. They would give it another try, the way Diane's parents gave it another try too many times to count, giving it another try, code for the pain a daughter feels when some mornings dad is there eating Cheerios and some mornings mom says, I hope that fucker drives that thing off a fucking bridge. Diane Maddox, who is unhappy, but for whom divorce does not feel like an option. Whether to prove something to her parents or to Mad About You, she isn't sure. Diane Maddox, who wonders whether things would have gone better had she taken her husband's last name, though, of course, a name can't save you. A name can't save a marriage, can't save a house from sale or a boy from the bottom of a lake. Diane in the ambulance. Diane not crying, keeping calm. Diane following the paramedics' instructions as the ambulance navigates country roads and the paramedic measures Michael's blood pressure. Diane Maddox, not Starling, and it's never too late to change a thing except sometimes it is, pressing the damp cloth to the head of the man she loves or loved. Some days, let's face it, she's not sure. Blood pooling beneath the cloth, the forehead an awfully vascular area, the paramedic says, worse than it looks, which Diane takes to mean looks worse than it is, though again, she can't be sure. There will be stitches, though she hopes against concussion, against brain injury, against anything permanent, because in all fairness, can the girl who said in sickness and in health still speak for Diane at 33? Say Michael slips into a coma or spends his life in diapers, drinking through a straw. Does the Diane who said, I do, love this man enough to wipe him another 50 years? And how to love a man who's made it clear, if not in words, then in scowls, in sighs, in the way he picks strings from the frayed cuffs of his jeans, that he'd rather her not have the child. Does she love him enough to stay? Does she love herself enough to leave? Diane doesn't know, knows only that Michael's blood is real and warm and won't stop rising from his head. The ambulance brakes, the doors open, and Diane breathes. The hospital is not what she was expecting. Small and beige and boxy, the building looks less like a hospital than a bank someone dropped onto an acre in the woods. Gently, Diane is pushed aside by a nurse at the curb, her husband lowered into a wheelchair and asked to hold the cloth to his own head. Of all the fears she has ever known, fear of flying, of snakes, of seeing the Styx minus sign become a plus. Never has she known a fear like watching her husband's face paint the water red. The paramedic pushes the wheelchair forward. The nurse holds the door open for Michael to be pushed through, and Diane follows, feeling useless. Inside, the waiting room is empty, the floor a checkerboard. The woman at the front desk is rude. The hallways are hot. The x-ray room is cold. Then Michael is on a table and she is at his side. The betadine goes on and Michael winces, forehead orange. The needle goes in and she has to look away. She holds his hand. The next time she looks, 8 Frankensteinian stitches hold his head together. They fill the gap between eyebrow and hairline, as though Michael's left eyebrow has an eyebrow of its own. Then the x-rays are in and all is well. Good enough for this country doctor anyway, though Michael gives Diane a look that says, when we get home, I'm getting a second opinion. Not that they can afford a second opinion. What with a mortgage they can hardly handle on a house that's worth half what they paid in 2007, 4 maxed out credit cards, plus Diane's student loans, which no matter how hard she ignores them, aren't exactly going anywhere. Still, she's glad to see him talking, smiling. Mostly, though, she's happy she won't have to change his diapers till death do them part. That said, there is a diaper she wouldn't mind changing in 7 months. This love for a thing unborn, a thing that isn't even yet a thing. How to explain this love to her husband? She promised him she'd never want a child, and she'd meant it at the time. The mistake wasn't getting pregnant. The mistake was making a promise that was never hers to keep. The doctor scrubs his hands. A nurse will be with them shortly to discuss care and cleaning, he says, then dries his hands and leaves. Michael's still on the table, lying down. His eyes are on her middle, as though he can see beyond her waist into the womb. We're keeping it, she wants to say, but doesn't. Not yet. She's not religious, but she is superstitious. It seems bad luck to fight about the pregnancy today, as though doing so might invite the spirit of the dead boy into her, might curse her with a baby born blue-lipped, without breath. If fates are steered by thoughts, by words, the least Diane can do on this day is keep quiet, and so she lets her husband hold her hand. She smiles, and there are many, 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 many things she does not say. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to one more short scene. This is toward the last third of the book. This is a book about open secrets, and one of the secrets that has come out during the course of the weekend is that the sons had a sister they never knew, that their parents had a daughter who only lived a month and died from SIDS. And so they're just learning that they had this sister, and they've asked to see a picture of her. This comes on a night after there's been a car accident in which nobody is hurt except for a deer. So Michael and Thad are sitting with their mother and father here. Michael's mother returns to the table. Her purse is on the floor, and she pulls it into her lap. From her purse, she pulls a wallet, and from the wallet, a sleeve of photographs. Here, behind plastic windows yellowed by time, are the Starlings, father, mother, sons. From between the pictures of her sons, his mother extracts a wallet-sized photograph of June. In the picture, Michael's sister lies on her back in a diaper on a sheepskin rug. She faces the camera, and there's a fierceness there, a curiosity. Her eyes are blue, her hair as black as night. The year is 1983, the date stamped in the corner under Olin Mills. Michael passes the photograph to Thad. She's beautiful, Dad says. I'm sorry, their father says. I'm sorry we kept her a secret. I'm sorry for your loss, Dad says. He returns the picture to their mother, who puts her daughter away and returns the wallet to her purse. I didn't mean to kick him, Michael says. I didn't mean to lose my grip. He hasn't planned to say this, to confess, but spilling secrets he finds he can't stop. The boy, he says. I had his hand underwater. I had him for a second, and I kicked him, and I let go. You had to come up for air, Dad says. You would have drowned. I should have drowned before coming up alone. No, his mother says. Your children are going to need their father. You're going to be a good father, Michael, his father says. They keep talking, his parents, but Michael is no longer listening. He's thinking of the boy in the lake. He's thinking of his sister. That evening, leaving the deer, Michael turned and watched the carcass through the rear windshield as the car pulled away. He half expected a vulture to land, but the body lay unaccompanied where they'd rolled it to the shoulder of the road. It would lie intact a while longer, until, by whatever transubstantiation it turned to carrion. Michael likes that idea. The notion, however naive or childish, that there might be a period of grace that keeps buzzards at bay, that even the body of a wild animal might be afforded time to lie in state, ceremonial, untouched. And maybe this is benediction enough, to be a deer in the middle of the road, to be a boy at the bottom of a lake, to be an infant held fast in the folds of her bassinet, to lie a minute, fragrant and warm with life just left, to linger, to lie, before the rushing paramedics move forward in their rushing, before the dark fish paddle deeper in their deepening, before the truck, fender bent, hurries away, and the shadows circle darkly, darkly drop. Just this, to stay a while, missed, lost, loved, before the birds descend and you're picked clean. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You really didn't give those characters a break. That was very well done. All right, so up next, finishing us up for the night, is Jonah Mixon-Webster. Jonah Mixon-Webster is a poet, scholar, and a conceptual sound artist from Flint, Michigan. His debut poetry collection, Stereotype, won the Pan America Joyce Osterwell Award and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. He is an alumnus of Eastern Michigan University and received a PhD in English creative writing from Illinois State University. He is the recipient of the Bingham Prize for Poetry and fellowships from the Vermont Studio Center, Center for African American Poetry and Poetics, the Conversation Literary Festival, and the Penn Writing for Justice program. His poetry and hybrid works are featured in various publications, including the Yale Review, Callaloo, The Rumpus, Harper's, Best New Poets, and Best American Experimental Writing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Molly. I just want to also just say thank you, Miho, and thank you, Jamie, for those readings and performances. Those were beautiful. Oh my God. I'm sitting over here like, gosh, I need to smoke. So, I was stressed out. I'm like over here, going through this little box of Newports. I'm quitting soon. But all right, people. Thank you, everybody. Also, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks, James, and thanks everybody. I'm sorry, I said James. I mean Jason. Thank you, Jason. Everybody at River Styx for inviting me out. This is real cool. I'm getting into a sound piece real fast. Black Ontology number 10. The Real Nigga and Disintegration.
At this juncture, inexorable meaning through erasure and the signal of the edge that the rib, the meat, the fat, the flush, the coin, the silver, the blood, the juice, the box, the bird, the feather, the milk, the land, the bottle, the lash, the nick, the dime, the dove, the dust, the soil, the shore, the shine, the shell, the man, the ball, the cup, the air, the car, the sip, the shoot, the shield, the meal, the muscle, the meat, the minutes, the glass, the draw, the weather, the wind, the salt, the wood, the word, the draw, the skin, the fit, the fitted, the tassel, the tip, the point, the stack, the stave, the dam, the deacon, the text, the din, the braid, the cave, the star, the money, the give, the document, the fact, the scab, the tap, the hand, the drain, the jaw, the jest, the stage, the track, the wind, the how, the meter, the yoke, the jam, the skull, the huff, the jump, the pick, the peak, the shit, the shake, the kick, the chill, the stream, the lick, the river, the marsh, the cap, the slit, the juke, the bread, the bread, the bread, the break, the bread, the break, the bread, the bread, the break, the bread, the bread, the break, the chin, the tint, the bread, 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 breath, 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 breath,
the bread, 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 the chin, the tint, the bush, the clutch, the lair, the hush, the plea, the thrift, the reed, the ring, the brass, the roach, the foot, the gist, the skit, the shade, the scope, the mist, the market, the matter, the screw, the lead, the river, the mister, the mask, the cloak, the take, the shake, the bend, the jugger, case, the path, the clip, the chin, the X, the fuse, the joust, the knife, the shit, the pitch, the throw, the push, the meter, the mill, the grin, the tooth, the shun, the badge, the ball, the sand, the seat, the walk, the gel, the maker, the light, the tight, the spell, the clean, the post, the trench, the bunker, the trench, the valley, the book, the script, the jacket, the church, the boy, the stoop, the box, the swing, the lays, the limb, the line, the axle, the tether, the limb, the stuff, the lane, the bag, the toast, the gill, the vigor, the concern, the cure, the cold, the cook, the gene, the oil, the glue, the mark, the pot, the score, the shook.
This is Black Ontology number 5. Black as if always the blues. Of a stridulated half note, night gristle, locust chirp, bold neck, waxed lips, wet stain, a body thronged hard and buried in the open light. The root of it dug up with a mouth, stretched, reaching to scratch the noose from its throat and give everyone a song. Well, ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. And I ain't got no way to make it out. Try to find me some help. No, it can't be found. Well, ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. If I could, I'd run right straight out of town. Don't even need me no shoes, just feet on the ground. Well, ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't even got me a penny to make a pound. They about took all I had, who am I now? Well, ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Now imagine if they never would have cut me down. I said, imagine if they never would have cut me down, would have make it out, still be fine. Feet on the ground, out of town. Took a penny and made a pearl, out of water and out of ground. When I make it out, still be fine. Cut me down, still be fine, still be fine. Weapons of thought could wield. In the word of the mind of the word. Murder, a simple premise, quick utility, pistol or cane, a wood or any metal, new money for old rope, a field for the coffin. A knowing, a simple premise, inevitability, a shout in a gather, a rubbernecking, a slew occupation, knife in a bread box, missiles in a hamper, bombs in the basement, a trap, the catch, a rumor, inevitability, a simple premise. What becomes of a mind becomes of a body, zero thought, something hard, something harder, a knowing, time and place, depth and proximity, a piece of piss, the portent, a simple premise. Murdered. Look at the waist, a thing to hold and a thing to be held on to, a mother's purse, your father's pockets, armories of the state, mundane ornaments, a cross for your hands, a cross for your back, the forgetting, inevitability. Black sheep for burial, daylight for discovery, tokens of vengeance, a war for meaning, a war for peace. A simple premise. Want. For whom? For what? Nothing. The promise of threat. I woke burying the memory of myself in myself, chewing glass to a silent end of swallowing, and I stood straight as I woke, pushing a finger behind the snag that caught my tongue on the sticking edge. Hung down from a corner slant atop the wisdom tooth, now dead, my soft plunging breaks it into a sight. And what I recall from my sleep, another mouth, maybe, turning, and I bite my own hand, thinking, pain is only perceived in the mind, says the mind of the dreamer who for once now woke feels nothing. Perhaps then I say, either all of it hurts or none of it does. Which is how I come to find the blood and new tooth in my hand, apart from the projection of my body. I wrap the half molar in silk, placing it under the slunk head of a man and make a selfish wish. I blink and I'm somewhere else when what comes next is myself, with another figure committing an act in a parked impala bound by the shadow a market throws in some buzzing day lamp. I won't confess another thing. Yet, somehow, the screen on my device shatters, making a shallow web. I press a button bearing a slice into the point my thumb into to squeeze from underneath. The glass needle slowly pops from my flesh, peeking out with its smile, a beam of rose and silver garland hooking a peel of skin. I nestle in my bite to pluck the thorn out, becomes a bone plate I snap meat off of. The chewing cracks a crown on the palatal wall, and it's as if my eyes appear from the swinging door of my throat, and I look upon the double gate of stone, yapping on the severed glass. Out of sleep, I survey what remains of the tooth, catching more blood in the organ. My first rot, my first warning of the coming rot, warning of the body itself, another pillage. I'm getting to a couple of poems from the re-release of Stereotype. This is a cipher in which I could not save the gangster disciple in Boys Town. For K. And I imagine saying even your almost name would channel your body back away from this night. Off the hip, we broke necks. Looking back from the curbs, lipping onto the crosswalk, staged for two men making eyes at the other. The time of any man's gaze is telling. And this too we talk, leaving our boys behind to procure a seat on the steps of anonymity. In front of a stranger's house, you pull out and I do as you did. You tell me it gets fat. This too, a mirage you carry. I call your name and your look is blank. And through skin, we become neighbors. But nah, you are no fag. You catch me stutter in step. You tell me you've made it. Tell me 26 as if it were the winning number. Said, I used to be pretty. Said, man, not no more. And I want to sing it for you about how and whatever you want. About the black tattoo tear water, about the body you caught on this night, about the love you have for your niece in the passing minute. And I will do this thing trying to save you with my mouth. My mouth, a mirror of color and code. You ask if I know, and I promise I know. You promise nothing. And what I do next is another defeat. Write this, knowing that it won't keep you. Ode to Darnell, the erased Negro man in the middle of my name. Darnell, English, from the Old French, darnel, an annual grass. However, the plant was believed to produce intoxication. A variant spelling of Darnall, a habitational name from Darnall, a district of Sheffield, Yorkshire, Cheshire, both named from Old English, Dern, meaning hidden, and hall, meaning nook. It was said, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are even sweeter. So in your name, I listen not for some nightingale to unhook the chime from its would-be throat, save for the whistle of a single flare shot into the total blank of the mind's expanse. From where dost thou happy light retain? Upon what sweet and unsober face lie furled the living shadow? O darling gloom of muted horn and fire brush unsounding, if thou truly were a stem of grass or other earth, I would pluck it from its steady, to keep only for thyself etching endlessly the hallowed scores of thy name. Let me see. I'm sorry, I wasn't keeping track of time, y'all. I don't know if I have, we do one more. All right, let's see. I can get maybe one more in here. All right, y'all. So man, y'all help me out with this one. And by help me out, I mean just like send me some good energy. This poem is one that I need to really have memorized. I try to memorize as much of my stuff as I can. Sometimes it's jumbled all in there. But this one is one I need to really memorize, but it's so hard. It's so hard. And it's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like I can't. The title of the poem comes from a poem from one of my favorite poets, Francine Harris, who actually, stomped through St. Louis themselves. So this is called I'm Not All Nigger, which borrows a line from Francine Harris's poem, Sift. And I'm not all nigger. And I'm not all nigger. I'm not all slung neck, not all rope. I'm not all broke back. I'm not all pop. I'm not all headshot nor jailbird. I'm not all whistle at the white girl. I'm not all meat slump. I'm not all cannon of teeth gliding across the Tallahatchie night water. I'm not all gun stipple and spilt blood. I'm not the boom of red smoke, breaking the body open with a new exit, wet already. And I'm not all body. I'm not all dead fruit, dark swinging in the tree breeze. And though that is my blood, I'm still not the blood on the leaves. I'm still not all cotton mouth, hollow choke, hood whip, or not all t-shirt slogan and hashtag. I'm not all don't shoot. I'm not all I can't breathe. I'm not some orgiastic shadow of dead flesh, because even when I die, I'm still not all death. I'm not some brown sugar stark, honey pot, sour diesel, the blues and blue dream. No, I'm not all nigga, boy. I'm not all here in this sane, not the same haunt. Silence is the beginning, and silence will be the end. I'm come not as one, nor with nothing. Still, I'm still, and I still got my name. I'm still Jenny. I'm still Laura. I'm still Lawrence. I'm still Emmett. I'm still Mike. I'm still Marie. I'm still Jeremy. I'm still Tamir. I'm still Charlie. I'm still Brianna. I'm still Freddie. I'm still Ayana. I'm still Eric. I'm still Rakia. I'm still Walter. I'm still LaVar. I'm still Sean. I'm still Oscar. I'm still Trayvon. I'm still Amadou. I'm still George. I'm still Jordan. I'm still Tommy. And I'm still George. And my mama's still my mama. And my daddy's still my daddy. And these is all still my brothers and sisters. And I still have my school and my house. And I still graduated. And I still have my garden and my job. Remember, I still had a life before they took that. So when you tell my story, get it right and take all that shit back. Thank you. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Jonah. That was really good. Your delivery was amazing for all of those. I feel bad even like talking right now. I feel like I can't really follow up with that. That was really powerful. So we are going to open it up for a quick QA. So I'm going to remove the spotlight so we can see us all, and just for you to unmute yourself or just post things on chat if you don't want to talk. Me and Jason can ask the questions as well.
Let me start it off. Jonah, what do you, your medium is interesting, and I don't want to say all over the place because it's actually not, but it's dynamic and not, or, you know, normal reading, which has been awesome. Where do you think you're falling into, or are you trying to not be categorized, or are you just trying to do your thing and see where it, you know, where that leads or whatever?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Jason. Yeah, it is all over the place. It's fine. It is. I literally am all over the place when I'm making this stuff. Like, I'm literally going from like here and moving, like, you know. So I think some of the process kind of ends up in, like, I think, like, just the spectrum of my work. You know, most of the stuff I do is very sonic driven. You know, I think from my own kind of craft perspective, I'm always trying to think about, like, how do we activate the senses, right? You know, the senses are designed, they're purposed, you know, for our self-preservation, for, you know, a kind of conatus, you know, if you will. And so I think what art helps us preserve ourselves, you know, preserve, you know, like our histories, our cultures, right? Through the senses. And, you know, so it's why, you know, like Miho's work is so strong, why Jamie's work is so strong, right? They're activating our senses, you know, constantly. You know, and so I think the work, I'm just trying to find, like, what are the ways I can just constantly shift or activate different vibrations, activate different experiences, you know. If I was in a physical space with you all, I might be moving around the space. You know, so I'm always just thinking about, like, how are we activating our senses, you know, for the purpose of, you know, that art can preserve us in a certain way, right? It can, you know, somebody say, you know, kind of save us, not to, like, romanticize it, right? But and, you know, the kind of dynamism that I'm trying to reach for through the work, you know, is just to kind of, you know, reach different, you know, audiences, or just different, you know, perspective, learning styles, right? People, you know, uptake information completely differently. So it's like, in order to reach different audiences, like, I do have to change and go into video. I have to go change. I have to switch up and go into more sound stuff. I have to go into more of a somatic performance. I have to, you know, play around with the vibrations, with the concrete sound structures, right, in the space, or through the digital space, right, even. So that's pretty much like the aim of, like, how all this stuff kind of, you know, how I can go from, like, DJing to singing, poetry to, you know, and in and out of different, you know, textual, literary genres. You know, it's just to try to, right, hit those different angles that people uptake information, right? You know, some pieces might not click with some people, but some things will. The singing might not click with some folks. And I can't sing, so thank you for bearing with me, but I do have some vocalists that I'm working with to actually get that blues out. But yeah, so I'm always gonna do that dance between these genres and these forms. Just try to reach as many different varied audiences as possible.
I was actually as interested in your transitions as how conscious you are of moving from one to the other, because it seems like not that you haven't practiced or given readings, but you know, that your transitions from one to the other were different than the transitions in between the books, the poems, etc.
Yeah, they can't compete with each other. The performance can't compete with the book. The book can't compete with the performance, but they can complement each other, right? And they can produce different, you know, typically when people hear the Black Anthology 5, about the blues, they get a different poem. This one time I'm trying to, you know, think about how to switch it up. I take a lot of cues from like musicians, right? You know, like when they're in concerts, you kind of never hear the same thing twice, right? And so I'm really interested in that space. Like, how does the work get to live and evolve and change, right? Through the very, you know, approaches, the very, you know, modes or modalities that is kind of being, you know, that the vectors, right, that is, you know, kind of being sent through or moved through. So yeah, and then the switches, like I didn't structure this. I didn't have like a set list or anything. I was just kind of trying to move in the groove.
I have 2 questions from chat. I'm gonna start with another one, Jonah, since you're still talking, since this was for you. This is, how do you go from Old English to slam poet badass? Would you ever mix the two?
You know, it's so funny because when I first started writing, like, you know, like it was like void of any racial stuff, any content. You know, I was trying to come from this whole postmodern lens where like identity is false and all this kind of shit. How we demystify identity, dematerialize it. But then, you know, like being a Black person in the world and being a Black gay man in the world specifically, I'm like, my identity shit needs to be here. The identity has to work here in some way, right? And so, you know, I started, you know, like, so obviously Def Poetry Jam, that was like my first kind of, you know, just interest in seeing, you know, what can be done in poetry, how people were, you know, using this performance, you know, kind of presence and cadences, you know, and using this their voice, you know, as an instrument. So I got really fascinated with that. But I was still, you know, like reading, I think at the time, I mean, I wasn't necessarily reading too much women, or but I was really interested in some different voices. You know, I think I was William Carlos Williams, and at the time, and I was reading a bunch of other like modernist poets, and then some other stuff. You know, some old, you know, other antiquated forms, and you know, and thinking about how beauty was constructed in that voice, right? And then in that poem, you know, the ode, I was trying to use that voice to subvert its own kind of hierarchical, you know, place, you know, in the genre. That poem used to say, some nigga once said her melodies are sweet, but those are so, you know, at first I had to take like this kind of, you know, irreverent kind of turn to thinking about, you know, like ode to a Grecian urn or something like that. But you know, I think it's all about just thinking about how our identities can clash, and we can kind of, you know, create parodies out of some of these things that were, you know, heralded as, you know, being the, you know, top notch, right? You know, high lyricism, if you will. And so, yeah, I think as far as bringing that voice to a slam, I think, yeah, I could do, you know, that can happen, but in a very satirical way, right? You know, even using that voice, trying to, you know, like create this artifice of beauty, right? But keep it Black, you know, artifice of beauty through that voice, keep it Black. Yeah. So, you know, I think it's always, we can find that, you know, what is it? Slip the yoke, slip the joke. So I forgot. Somebody might help me. Somebody have me in the chat. What is the saying? Slip the yoke, something, split the joke, something like that. You think somebody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, so I'm always thinking about how you can do that.
Thank you. This is for all of our readers, and this comes from Ben. So where does your work begin? Pen, like pencil, pen on paper, fingers on a keyboard, sketchbooks, speaking out loud? What's your guys' process?
I can jump in. So for me, there's a couple different things. If I'm working on a story or a novel or an essay and the project is going well, then I feel like I can maintain momentum from day to day. If I can write every day for a few hours a day, I can usually just slip right back in where I left off and start writing. When it's not going well or I'm feeling really uninspired, then there are certain activities that I think will help me to get into that headspace. And this isn't unique to me. I've heard a lot of writers say the same thing, but if I take a shower, it really helps. If I drive a car, it really helps. Anything where my body's just doing some sort of rote mechanical process and it allows my brain to start thinking in language. And then if none of that is working, I'll sit down and I'll just read for an hour. I'll just, whether it's something I've read before, something I've never read, poetry, novel, doesn't matter. Just something that gives me some access point into language. And hopefully at some point, some word or image or line of dialogue is going to trigger something for me that is going to give me an idea of something to write. I think my writing got better when I started giving myself permission to write scenes out of order, to write moments, just whatever I'm feeling like I need to write at that moment, and to not hold myself at the mercy of the story where it all has to be written chronologically or thought through before I start writing. You know, it's that old saying of no surprise for the reader, no surprise for the writer, and just let the story take me.
Miho or Jonah, feel free to talk about your guys' process.
What do I do? I think I tend to hoard words, the words or phrases that kind of capture my imagination. I have like a little notebook. I just kind of write down, like it could be an adjective, noun, or simply a line. And oftentimes, I think there's multiple directions. Sometimes it's an image that I sort of, my mind sort of makes an association of some kind. And I have to kind of write it down. And as I try to kind of turn it into poem, I kind of go deeper into why one thing is like this another thing from another realm. So image-based, sometimes the sound-based, but English is my second language. So, I admire poets who can really kind of be inspired by music and navigate by the sound. I think I started out as sort of an image-based poet, just as Ezra Pound says, like imagery is something that translates. So maybe that's where I began. And I'm hoping that I would be so comfortable in this another language too, that I can dream of a phrase, music. So.
Yeah, Miho, I just want to kind of come back to what you were saying, because I think like the sound and the image that I think, like the phraseology, like I was kind of picking up on, like, especially, I'm still stuck with the, like, here, eat my face, right? Like something like that, like, I was still stuck there, right? So I think the way you're curating these, these kind of phrases, and I think it's really it's really interesting how you kind of curate these materials and then you arrange them and you juxtapose them in these ways, like how you were talking about, and it just comes through so much. Oh goodness, I ain't even like, I can't wait to see it on the page. Once I'm like, I need to get it. Yeah, it was great. I think it kind of is bringing kind of a curiosity to think about. Maybe there's something, maybe we can all, I don't know, I'm trying to question or something we can kind of think about or frame as far as, like, do we privilege certain things, in our craft as far as, sound over the image or the image over the sound? Do we privilege, the phrase or the idiom over the sentence, or how do we, how are we making these decisions, right, based on the materials that we're curating, right, the sonic materials, the other sensory materials, and I think for me, one thing as far as my process goes, like I'm like always recording something, so I'm always doing these like guerrilla recordings. I'm always recording stuff on my phone, or maybe like sometimes I might also just like freestyle some songs, or I might actually just take like a log. I like to work with these wells, you know? So I think it was a question about like writer's block. And I think all these other things that are happening, you can kind of tell, you can hear, you can see it in like Jamie's work, right? You can see it, you can hear it in Miho's work. You know, like the way that, you know, it's the curation process, right? That kind of goes before, that's a part of the writing too, right? And so if you're thinking you're not necessarily writing or you have writer's block, you know, you can also be curating, right, at that same time. And to think about, you know, what it might look like to work with, you know, I call them either like wells or banks, right? It's just like little, like a list of like idioms that I'm really interested in. You know, I used to collect or create or keep like a list of like epithets, right? Kind of, you know, or just, you know, these, you know, curating, you know, experiences, right? And so I think, you know, as far as getting around that writer's block, right, it's just that curating processes that we kind of naturally do as humans. When we ever kind of read something, right, we might call it like memory, but it's a way of actively engaging with like, you know, a memory, or, you know, to be able to recall, you know, these things that we kind of come by or we cross, you know, and we actively seek out or search out, right? And so I don't know, I guess that's the kind of way to answer the question about, you know, what my process might look like, and then also like what I might be doing if I'm feeling writer's block. Because yeah, I didn't like write for like 2 or 3 years, like 2 years. I didn't really write much after my first book came out. And I kind of like I had writer's block then, but these curating processes, I think we have to think about them as being integral to the writing process as well.
Thank you. So I have, I think, one more question. This is for Miho. I know you write in both Japanese and English. How do you ferry between them? Or do you ferry? Are they separate? Do you translate them from one to the other?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And, you know, right now I'm kind of in the season of translation. So I'm actually translating American poets' work into Japanese. And so I was actually worried about tonight's reading. Am I going to be able to read and really be able to follow when my mind is kind of very much based in the Japanese language? But I think it's kind of a mix. It's kind of a chaotic thing. It used to be, when I go back to Japan, it took me 10 days to start dreaming in Japanese again, because I used to dream in English, and then, you know, after 10 days, my body, my mind, psyche kind of start to feel, oh, I'm in Japan. You know, it's safe to dream in Japanese, that kind of thing. And, you know, the same thing happens when I fly back to Chicago. And I just see such a huge gap between the two languages, you know, the Japanese and English. There is a smaller gap if you say, you know, you're comparing English with French, something like that. But there is such a big gap, and sometimes I'm overwhelmed, and other times, you know, part of me, you know, if I feel so moved by something in Japanese, if it's strong enough, I get impassioned by it. I feel like, no, this has to be universal. I don't care the struggle or what's going to take me to actually communicate this into another language, but I'll do it. It has to, you know, that sort of a sense. So yeah, I struggle with, you know, going back and you know, between two languages, but I also, you know, for like instance, tonight's reading, you know, I'm just deeply moved by Jamie's reading and Jonah's reading. And as I was just kind of, you know, was just so touched by Jonah's voice. It did something to me. What it does is that you kind of feel that you are free to make yourself vulnerable. To create something is to make yourself vulnerable in any language. It's a risky business. So you have to have the faith that it will mean something to others and it will be received by someone other than yourself. And so the risk taking, I think, is the same in any language. And I'm glad that I have Japanese because I loved my language so much so that I felt like what I learned in my language can be translated or could be spoken in a different language, even though it's going to be really hard.
That was really well said. All of you guys have been just amazing tonight, honestly. Like Jonah, Jamie, and Miho, you guys really upped the bar here. That was across the board just a great night for all of this. So thank you all for coming. I am going to take a moment just to ask if you want to join us on our reading on March 15th. It's going to be a good one. And just a reminder, I truly encourage all of you to go out and purchase all of these writers' books. We have them in our bookshop. I can put the link back in the bio. Just go out and support them. They're the ones who made it tonight, you know, they're the ones who made it so well. So once again, thank you all for coming. And Jason, do you have anything else to say, or does any of our readers want to say anything before we peace out?
Just to have the reader stay on until we get done.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.